Hey friends, welcome back. This is Ashley with Uncommon Roots Homestead. So today we are obviously inside, not out in the garden or on the farm. It is a dreary, rainy day. And so we woke up and we were kind of trying to figure out what we're gonna do today. I think that we're gonna spend most of the day packing and getting our stuff kind of like organized. We have the pod here. I don't know how much we're gonna do moving into the pod. It's pretty nasty outside, but we are gonna spend the day packing. And so we were kind of talking about breakfast and what we wanna do. And we had a really busy day yesterday. So we were like out and about and we ate out a lot, like more than I like to. And so when we were trying to figure out what we wanted to eat this morning, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make some fresh bagels, but I don't have any sourdough ready. So usually when I make bagels, I make sourdough bagels and they're amazing. I'll share the recipe sometime. But sourdough obviously requires a long ferment. Usually I have to start days in advance. If I knew I was gonna have or want sourdough bagels this morning, I would have started 2 or 3 days ago by feeding my starter and then preparing the dough and then letting it ferment for 12 hours and then forming and baking, and it's a really long process. So this morning I was thinking, I wonder if there is a faster way, and of course Google to the rescue. I found a quick bagel recipe and I want to give it a try. So I figured I'd bring you guys with me because we don't always have time for a 40-hour bagel experience. As much as I love sourdough, it's one of the things that's the hardest. Right now even my starter is in the fridge, so if I wanted to bake anything sourdough, I'm at least 12 hours from being able to start the process. So today the recipe I'm using just has 5 ingredients. It's flour, warm water, salt, sugar, and instant yeast. So I buy instant yeast. I know not everybody does. I don't just bake sourdough. I share sourdough a lot, mostly because it's more of an experience, right? When I'm baking something quick, I don't usually feel like people care that much, when I'm making 40-minute buns or something like that. But it is something that I do fairly often, when we don't have the foresight to know what we're gonna need from a sourdough perspective. I almost always lean back on baking something fresh and just using yeast. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So if you don't have yeast, if you don't buy it like this, you can buy it in little packets. There's a bunch of different kinds. This is just the fast acting dry yeast. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So another pro tip, if you are reading a recipe and it's telling you that like you're gonna have to knead something for a long time, like these bagels said they needed to be kneaded for 15 minutes. I don't usually do that. I don't, kneading is not my favorite activity. I don't know if it is anyone's favorite activity. It's way harder than you would think. If you've never tried to knead dough, like knead a thick dough, try it once. But I always find when I hand knead that it actually doesn't break up the gluten as well as it needs to. So I've been using my KitchenAid mixer for that for a long time and it works just as well, if not better. So I just put the dough hook on here. You can actually buy a dough kneader. I don't have one, so I don't really think it's necessary. But anyways, what I'm gonna do is mix the dry ingredients and then I'm going to add the yeast and the water and then I'm gonna knead it for like 15 minutes. So I am making a dozen bagels. So that means I'm gonna do like 5 cups of flour, 2 cups of water, and then 1 teaspoon of yeast. And I wanna say it's like a tablespoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt. Now with a recipe like this, you can usually substitute sugar. So this is just organic cane sugar. We use organic cane sugar, but if you don't like refined sugars, you could substitute for honey. Usually it's a 1-to-1. I find, I mean, honey is a little bit sweeter than sugar, but I find I need a little bit more honey than I need sugar in a lot of recipes. So play around with it. If you don't use sugar, it would be totally fine in this recipe to substitute with something else. I don't prefer other sugar substitutes like beyond honey or like date syrup, anything like the monk fruit, stevia. I'm just not a fan. I feel like they have an aftertaste. I just don't love it. So we don't use any of those, but you could substitute with any of those. Just make sure that you're looking at whatever the ratio is with a cane sugar to insert substitute, and then use that ratio. But it would be really good with honey, so you could definitely do that. So again, it was 2 tablespoons of sugar or whatever sweetener you're using. You want to use something with natural sugars though, because it helps activate the yeast. So it is important to have some type of sugar, but obviously like honey, those are sugars. They're just not cane sugar. So then 2 teaspoons of salt. And the reason that you're mixing these together is actually like salt can, just like sugar can activate yeast when there's water, salt can actually kill yeast. So you don't want to put your yeast right with your salt. You want to have it kind of like diluted into your flour. So I'm going to go ahead and give these like a quick mix them up, and then I'm going to add my 2 cups of warm water and then my teaspoon of dry yeast, and then I'm going to let this lovely machine do the hard work of kneading this for about 15 minutes. All right, so at this point, I try to be patient, but you're gonna want to make sure that the dough is the right consistency. So bagel dough should be kind of firm, difficult to knead, but it definitely all of the flour should be incorporated. So I'm gonna let this continue to knead. It's looking like there's a lot of flour, but I'm gonna let it continue to knead for a couple minutes. If that flour doesn't incorporate, I'll start adding just a tiny bit of water, like a tablespoon at a time. But I'll show you what it looks like right now. All right, so I went ahead and paused that for a second so I could tell you a little bit about why we're taking the time to knead this dough. So when you work dough consistently, you're actually activating and breaking down glutens at the same time, and you're also activating that yeast. And so it's really important for that knead time. Like if you have a recipe that calls for 5 minutes of kneading or 8 minutes of kneading, that's actually important because you need those gluten strains to start building and growing together and stretching. If you don't do that often, you'll end up with a dough that just wasn't quite ready, and instead of stretching, it breaks. So this is not ready yet. See how it's just breaking? It needs to continue to knead. So we're gonna let it do its thing. With this recipe, there's also not a ton to do while that's happening. I can go ahead and get my water ready on the stove, and I'm gonna use a little bit of honey. You can also use a little bit of baking soda. That's for boiling these. Once they're done resting, they're gonna finish kneading here, just a couple more minutes, and then I'm gonna shape them, put them on the pan, let them rest for 15 minutes. There's your 30 minutes. And then I am going to boil them really quickly, like 30 seconds each side, and then bake them, and then we'll be eating bagels. This is about the time where I wish I would have just set a timer. Feels like it's been about 15 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop it. All right, so let me get all these pieces out of the way. I thought that was gonna fall. All right, so this is what we are left with. So this is about what the dough looks like. You can see it is stretchier than it was before. It's still a very firm dough, but that's okay. Bagels are dense and firm, so I'm not super surprised by that. So what I'm gonna do now is form this into a ball, and then I'm gonna separate it into 12 pieces, form those into balls, and then I am going to shape them, cover them with a damp towel, and let them rest for 15 minutes. This time I will use a timer. sometimes it's hard to form a really dense dough into a ball. It's not as easy if you were doing like, I don't know, bread dough, and you can kind of like peel it and fold it and then roll it around. It's not quite like that, but it's still, it doesn't have to be perfect because I'm gonna form each of the individual bagels. I almost call them donuts, which now that sounds good. Maybe we should have gone that route. All right. Dough scrapers are one of my favorite kitchen tools. They're so versatile. I use it for everything. In fact, I often use it to like clean up my kitchen. Once everything's done, I'll literally just like scrape all of the stuff back towards me. It's great. So I know that this recipe makes 12, so I'm gonna try to pretty much eyeball it. You could get out your kitchen scale and weigh these to make sure they're even. We definitely do not care that much, so we're just trying to get bagels, and plus we have little kids, so they don't even eat big bagels. So we'll just kind of eyeball it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So obviously my sizes are a little off, but we're gonna go with it. So then I'm gonna take each little piece and kind of form it into a ball. Usually I do this by like pulling the edges towards the inside of my hands like this. I find that that's a really good way to start. And then once you get it into a nice little ball, you can actually like set it down and kind of pull it towards you like this to kind of firm up or tighten the edges. And then usually on the bottom, I'll just like pinch together. So it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. Honestly, homemade bagels in my house are never perfect because we're just eating them. We don't care that much. But if you are trying to make perfect, like picture perfect bagels, then you'll want to take a little bit more care in some of these steps to make it perfectly round, get your hole perfectly centered. Just things I probably won't do. What are you guys doing?
We're doing a little bit of space this place.
What are we doing? Train track.
Ooh, you cooking? You cooking bagels like mommy?
He's just destroying stuff.
That is loud, Liam.
It's also a great time if you haven't made coffee to ask your husband to make you coffee. We did also go ahead while I'm waiting for these to do their quick proof. I preheated the oven to 375. So what I'm gonna do when these are done in about 10 minutes is take each one, boil it for about 30 to 45 seconds, just flipping it and letting it just kind of like the outside is basically just getting cooked a little bit. It's why bagels have that kind of really smooth, crispy shell. That's where it's from. And so you want to have honey in your water or baking soda or something that's going to react with the dough. So I'm going to use honey this time. So I'm going to boil them for 30, 45 seconds each and then put them back onto this tray. That's when you're going to want to dip any of your toppings. So I'm going to do some salt and chive and also some everything. And then we're gonna bake them for like 15 minutes in the oven on 375. So there you go, less than an hour. We're gonna have bagels, homemade, fresh. Can't beat it. All right, so I'm getting my water ready to boil. I'm adding about this much honey. I'd say it's like tablespoon honey. Very specific. Okay, my timer has gone off. My water is coming up to a boil, so I want to show you what these look like while my family loses their minds. All right, it is nap time. So Kevin took Liam up to take his morning nap. Unfortunately, he could not make it the 45 to 50 minutes that it takes to make these bagels. But you can see they've puffed slightly. You're not looking for them to double in size or anything like that. They're just slightly puffy. This is good. It just is giving the gluten a little bit of a chance to relax. So now that it's relaxed, we are going to boil them really quickly, and then they're actually gonna rise when they're baking. So they're gonna get bigger than this. We just don't want them to overproof at this stage because it is a fast acting yeast. So they're ready to go into the water boiling. I'm gonna bring you over there and we'll flash boil these and then get the toppings ready and bake them. We're gonna be eating bagels in less than 20 minutes. All right, so I am about to boil these. This is my favorite bagel utensil. I don't even know what you call it. It's like a slatted spoon, but it's like super wide. So I can actually like set a whole bagel right on top and drop it in. And I'm literally just doing like 30 to 45 seconds each. It'll float. I usually like flip her over once and then I'll pop it back onto the tray and get them all done. All right, so last step before we get these in the oven. These just came out of that boiling water. So they are sticky, they're like half baked. So I'm gonna take them, I'm going to coat them in the topping. If you're a top and bottom kind of person, then you'll wanna do both at this stage. And then I'm gonna set them right back onto that baking tray. So it really is as easy as that. Also, Kevin is gonna make some Calabrian chili cream cheese while those are baking for 15 minutes. So all he did is took a Calabrian chili from our garden, chopped it up, and he's gonna mix it with some cream cheese. Super simple. So I'm just gonna do that now. And salt. Okay, so Kevin ended up adding some garlic to that Calabrian chili cream cheese, and it is really, really good. Really, really good. It looks like amazing. These look perfect. Okay, so you can see this. You can see how much they've like pillowed up, and they should be kind of light. They shouldn't feel nearly as dense as they did before because they've risen so much. These smell and look delicious. You're looking for like just a slight golden brown around the top. You can let them go a little longer if you want. You can take them out a little bit sooner. I don't mind a little bit of a doughy bagel, especially if you're eating them right now. So these are lightly brown though, so they should be perfect all the way through. And that's that. So I'm gonna get these cut up and we're gonna eat our breakfast.
Good.
It's really good.
Ah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yum.
Seems like an everyday kind of thing.
I don't know about that. Friends, thank you for joining me today in the kitchen. You always have a space here. Until next time.
Follow us on Instagram.
Follow us on Instagram.
You too. What are we gonna do with you?
And the trash.